Hello, my name is Suzanne and I'm a naturalist with the Newport Bay Conservancy, and I'm doing the marine biology station as part of the Friends Tour today. As you can see, we have the upper Newport Bay behind me here. And what is marine biology and how does it come into play in the bay? As you can see, there's the water behind me. It's primarily salt water, and that's what marine biology studies. It studies salty water environments and the animals within them. And then how it influences the bay is that our saltwater in our oceans is influenced by tides. And in Southern California, we have what's called a mixed semi-diurnal tide, where we have 2 high tides and 2 low tides every day. And they're influenced by the gravitational pull of the sun and to a greater extent, the gravitational pull of the moon. So if you can imagine it, it's like there's a little bulge on 2 sides of our planet, and then the rocky core is kind of spinning in between. What that means for us is that land is covered and uncovered throughout the day, twice a day, almost every day. And the animals and plants here have to have a variety of different adaptations in order to survive that. So as you can see behind me, there are islands that are kind of sticking up out of the water, and that habitat is what we call salt marsh. So it's primarily a drier area that has occasional inundation from the salt water that we have in our area that is going to be pushed in with those high tides. So the plants there have to have adaptations to survive that salt water, and so do the animals that are there. So the area just below the salt marsh is where we have the mud flats in the bay. And the mud flats are an incredibly dense area of life in our upper Newport Bay. Up to 1,000 organisms per cubic foot of mud are living out there right now, and they're providing food not only for the migratory birds that come through the upper Newport Bay as part of the Pacific Flyway and year round, but they're also providing food for other organisms such as crabs and fish, and the birds that then will eat the fish, which we will get to. What's beyond the mud flats is the open water, and that's where we're going to see more of the fish and rays and sharks that might come through here to eat those things that are living in the mud. How it's broken out is, many of you might be familiar with what's called a food chain or a food web or a food pyramid, and you can really see that at play here in the bay. At the very bottom, we have what are called producers. And so producers are organisms that are going to take energy from the sun, and they're going to convert it into sugars and carbohydrates, just like the plants that we have on land. The ones that we have in the bay are often much smaller, and they're going to be what are called diatoms, which are a very pretty, clear, usually glass-shaped algae that are unicellular. There's also ones called dinoflagellates, which are made out of a keratin like our hair or our fingernails, and they have that as their shell. And then they might have what's called a flagella, which is like a whip-like structure that they use to swim around in the water. And then there's larger primary consumers that are our algae. So we can have something like this macroalgae in this picture here, which is a type of ulva or sea lettuce. You can also have eelgrass, which is a vascular plant that grows out here and is really important habitat for lots of little baby fish. Or you can even have more like fibrous algae that are going to grow on these other structures. Those in turn are food for what we call our primary consumers. Our primary consumers can be little guys like this, where we have little baby jellyfish. This is a baby, like a crustacean called a copepod. Annelids is a fancy name for a worm, and they're also going to be eating these guys. And then this is what's called a veliger, which is a baby snail. And those are all going to go through and eat it. The larger snails are also going to eat those algae and those like primary producing organisms, as are some other organisms like fish and even ducks. They'll go through and dabble and pull off that algae to eat. We also then have our secondary consumers, which are many of our filter feeders that we have here in the bay. They'll either live in or on a surface, and then they'll have, like in this case, a siphon on our clam that is going to pull in water and filter out our diatoms or our dinoflagellates, or it's even going to be able to eat these larger guys that are drifting through that are our zooplankton. These barnacles, they'll attach to harder substances, and you can see there's a little feathery thing here, as is on this worm, and they use that structure to kind of comb through the water. It's a little bit sticky or has little like cilia to grab on and pull in, and they'll actually clean it off with their mouths. These guys either need hard structure or will live in the mud itself. It just kind of depends on the individual animal. From here, we kind of move up into the blurry line of secondary and tertiary consumers, kind of depending on who eats what along the way. A fish like this may go straight for some nice ulva here, so it might be a primary consumer, but then it also might be eating some of these amphipods and the annelid worm larvae and then become a secondary consumer. Ducks are kind of the same way. They like to eat little plant material, but they're not going to say no to a worm. And then as we move up, you can see that there's animals like this snowy egret, osprey, bobcat, and red-tailed hawk that will then go after opportunistically or on purpose to feed one of these guys. We see osprey around here all the time, diving down to eat birds, as we see great blue herons, snowy egrets, terns, and cormorants. So in the bay, it kind of becomes a magnification issue at times, because what we do upland in our communities in terms of polluting or letting trash go into the waterways, if a little guy down here is able to eat it, then it's going to go up the whole food chain so that these larger animals get a larger concentration of it, which is one of like the local big biological issues that we have in the bay. So in addition to being an ecological reserve, the Upper Newport Bay is a very unique area in California where it's also a marine protected area. What a marine protected area is in California is it's a place that is open water that has a level of protection either from collection, from a variety of human use, or from fishing. And there's different categories of them. The Upper Newport Bay is what's called a state marine conservation area. So there's limited fishing. You're not allowed to fish from boat, and you have to fish kind of specifically from some key regions. And it's protected because of the values that the fish and the habitat bring to the area in terms of wildlife, human use, and even recreation and our economy. This is a cool map that the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the California Marine Protected Areas Council has come up with that really talks about how estuaries function with offshore communities. So on the left-hand side, you can see that there are, some American coots and some cute little whimbrels, and they're hanging out in an estuary. The water that comes from here and comes from our communities upland goes directly out into the ocean. That's going to have an impact on not only our rocky intertidal habitats like we have in southern Orange County, primarily in like the Corona del Mar area, Crystal Cove State Park, Laguna, and then Dana Point, but it also is going to impact things that are happening further out in our oceans. So the water that's up here, it can go during a rainstorm a quarter mile, half mile offshore, and then impact those fisheries, which also impacts our economy. They're all kind of tied in together, and the things that we do here have an impact in our offshore communities, and the things that happen out there have an impact in these communities as well. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, my name is Suzanne. Thank you. I hope you learned something today about some marine biology, and I look forward to seeing you sometime in person to learn more about the Upper Newport Bay.